It is my highest honor to have my dear friend Andrew Tran join the channel today. I met Andrew in 2016 as undergrad students at the University of California, Davis in a religious studies class about the Synoptic Gospels, which was taught by Wendy Terry. I invited Andrew on the channel to share his interesting journey through the meaning crisis, the Catholic Church, university challenges, Jordan Peterson, coming of age, and what it's like to be a grade school teacher and graduate student during the isolation orders. So hi, Andrew.
What's up, Brother Joe? It's good to be with you.
All right, man. Welcome to the channel. So I was just wondering if we could start out by you telling us your story. So maybe what your roots are, where your parents came from.
Yeah, for sure. So I am Vietnamese American, first generation to grow up here in the United States. My parents, and a lot of people like my age as well, their parents were refugees from the Vietnam War. So my mom escaped from her home country when she was 16 with my grandpa, because she was the only one who didn't have a family yet. And then my dad was actually in a Roman Catholic seminary since he was like 9 years old. And a big thing for the communists when they kind of like took over Vietnam was like they didn't want any religious affiliation or any influence from like the Vatican to kind of control their country. So my dad was kind of like kicked out of the seminary when he was like 27, and he was the only one in his family without a wife or kids. So he was the one chosen to be the one to escape, because what our families wanted back in Vietnam was they heard all these letters from people who made it to America and said, yo, we can build a living here and give you guys money to help you out. So that's kind of what my parents did. And they snuck out in this like really tiny boat in the middle of the night, and they had to hide underneath the deck and crouch underneath, or else the communists won't see them. And then they literally thought that like America was just like a couple kilometers away, you know, because they just heard of people that they made it, you know. And my parents, they didn't grow up with a map. Like maybe my dad did because he was educated at a seminary, but my mom at 16 didn't think that like America was way off, you know. Wow. So they were stranded on the ocean for about a week. And
how big was the boat?
Yeah, so the boat was, I don't know how to describe it. It was about 70 people, and let's see,
like a lifeboat?
About a meter, right? No, it was just like a
fishing boat?
A normal fishing boat, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so
they're trying to cross the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
Oh my, that sounds like the life of Pi.
Yeah, dude. And like my mom said that the scariest thing were the waves, like seeing how many times the boat could have flipped over, you know, because it was so small and there were so many people on it. And actually my dad, when he actually like made it to the refugee camp, he did not want to be near the ocean for 3 years because he was just so scared. Yeah. Of like how...
Wait, did the boat make it all the way to the US or what happened?
So actually, they were rescued by an American fishing boat. And my dad told me that the American fishing boat was about to leave them until they saw the children on the boat. So what they actually did was they brought the Vietnamese refugees on the boat onto a refugee camp in Indonesia. And my parents stayed there about 2 years until they were granted citizenship by a charity organization.
Wow, it sounds like almost like a miracle that they even made it.
Yeah.
So what was it like growing up in the States? Because so you were born in the States, right? You weren't part of the boat or anything like that?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so what was it like growing up?
Yeah, so growing up, I think a lot of immigrant families can relate to this. Was like I would just hear my parents continually tell me, appreciate what you have, because we didn't have what you had when we were back in Vietnam. We didn't have the food that you have. We didn't have these activities you could do, and we kind of save up a lot of money for you. So do the best you can, and I understood that came out of love, where they really wanted to give me the best. But I think at such a young age, there was just this insecurity of thinking like, what can I do? Like how can I make my generation better for you? So whenever I did something, whether that would be school, I did also piano, I was also in gymnastics. I was not just thinking like, I want to get like a really good recital or a really good score when I do my floor routine. I thought, how can I be a better person for all the people who sacrificed for me to be where I'm at? And kind of like my entire life was how to respond to sacrifice, because with sacrifice came pain and suffering, and I didn't know how to address that as a child. So it came with this guilt. I actually realized I was motivated by guilt a lot, saying like, I don't deserve this, but I'm going to do this because someone gave this to me. And yeah, that's what pushed me through.
Seems like you're a profound thinker, even at a young age, Andrew.
I don't know, man. It was weird. From like just a very young age, I just was aware. I call this like this double awareness, where you can see yourself, but you also can see yourself from a higher perspective. And I realized when people talk a lot about like spiritual awakening, they realize there's this dual perspective where they can see themselves and also see like this, how this higher self would see them, So as a kid, I didn't grow up with a lot of toys. I didn't grow up with a lot of video games because my parents were very big on saving money. They worked at a nail shop, very Vietnamese. But so I played a lot with my imagination, and I would just interact with these I don't know what they were, these roles, and I would play with like these I don't know, people. I don't know if I made it up, but I was just aware that there's different personas or even spirits around me that are influencing my life. And I don't know.
Seems like you're very spiritual sensitive too.
It drives me crazy a little bit sometimes.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, were you involved in a church as well growing up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I grew up Catholic, Roman Catholic, my entire life. And mainly just with my family, we would just mainly go to church on Sundays. We would celebrate like the traditional Christmas, Easter. But it was more like a family thing. So for our family to get together, and then we would pray in Vietnamese every night and sing hymns in Vietnamese. So it was kind of a way for just, like my mom would tell me, it's what was passed on to our generations, so we remember our ancestors and our generations before us. But what actually really drew me in to kind of like deepen my faith as a child was kind of when I saw the life of Jesus Christ in his death and resurrection. He gave a message on how to respond to sacrifice. That sacrifice actually had a meaning and a direction. Like it wasn't just something where I felt like I was someone's burden, and I had to make some use out of it. But that Jesus's death and resurrection showed me that sacrifice has a greater glory. That it's not just the pain and suffering, but it's for something that's like this greater good. So a lot of my life, I even realized in my journals, like I would just think about, like, I'll talk about morality and like how a person should be in my third grade journals. And yeah, I was like, man, I am such a crazy person. But yeah, I just really wanted to be like this person named Jesus Christ. And for some reason, there would be people every Sunday to gather in front of this altar with this man hanging, like this man on the cross, and they look to him and they worship, they say like, I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, and they'll recite the creed. And I'm like, this one man brought all these people together every Sunday in my neighborhood and also around the world. I'm like, I want to be like him, because for some reason he gives something that gets people through, like I don't know, I was just aware of like things are just, for one man's pleasure comes from another man's pain. And I would just see that and I would feel guilty about that, you know, but Jesus made a good meaning and purpose out of that I really wanted to embody.
Mm-hmm. No, so this was during, grade school, high school. I'm just wondering, how did a lot of these things carry over? So you've been journaling, you've been, imagining in your ideal self or your higher self. You've been active in the church and recognizing these different patterns in this coming together of celebrating Christ in the church. I'm just wondering, how did that carry over after you left your parents' house in high school and went to UC Davis, where you and I met?
Yeah. So once again, I came with this expectation of, Mom and Dad, I'm going to make you proud, because I am so fortunate that my parents were able to save up their entire money for me to help actually spend for my college, where I am so fortunate I don't have to take out any loans. So I was just thinking, I thought about my parents working long hours at the nail shop. I thought about my mom having arthritis and how I want to take care of them when I grow up. So I was like, these 4 years have to be so important, where I have to make myself a somebody. So kind of
seems like the pressure started building up. And
yeah. And so it would just drive me crazy, but I use it as a motivation. And kind of like what I saw university being was, I wanted to embody this ideal self. And as I listened to other podcasts, I listened to how people go through university, they pursued what they wanted, right? But what I actually stepped my foot in front of was this idea of, I have to do what I should do, to provide for my family, to make sure they have a secure future, and also for myself if I have my own family. And so I was like every other Asian kid, thought he wanted to become a doctor, but there was just...
You weren't studying medicine when I met you.
No, I wasn't. So we met in our third year of college. So my first 2 years I was pre-med, but then I realized in myself, if I want to give to people, I have to give who I am. And what I cared about was kind of more this holistic side of the self. So I transitioned from neurobiology to psychology, and I really wanted to fit in a religious studies minor, which is when we started taking all those classes together with Wendy Terry, and it was really good. But yeah, it was a lot of pressure I put on myself. And then my fourth year of college, I started thinking about, maybe I'm called to become a priest, and enter seminary in the Roman Catholic Church. And part of the promise you have to make in your vows is that you have to live a vow of celibacy, meaning you completely dedicate your life to the service of the kingdom of God, and to be available and have your heart open to anyone who comes to you in what we call the sacraments, whether that be confession or for baptism or for giving the Eucharist. You completely give yourself in that way. But
if I remember right about your fourth year, Andrew, is that you happen to have a relationship with a girl. So maybe you could describe some of those tensions or what you're processing.
Oh man, I learned from that fourth year, what Jesus is saying was so true when he said, man cannot have two masters. If you say yes to one, you have to say no to the other. If you want to give yourself in a promise. And I tried doing both, and I realized I was cheating on both because I wasn't fully giving myself and kind of just going back and forth. So what ended up happening was after university, I decided to let go of the relationship and pursue, like, I'm gonna be a priest. I'm gonna be a priest. I'm gonna be a priest, because I wanted to become this somebody who I idealized and imagined since I was a kid. You know, I was like, I had to prove to myself I could be a somebody. But as I was doing that, I was living with the Capuchin Franciscan, their religious order by St. Francis. And I lived with them for about one or 2 months. And I was about to apply and become a novice or a postulant. They would call it a
What is
postulant.
that process like, Andrew?
So they actually want to get to know you first. So they allow you to live with them for free. And this, you kind of do the morning prayers with them. You do the evening prayers, the afternoon prayers. You eat with them. You help make food with them. You help fix cars with them. So I kind of just like am living their life. And I literally just follow the brothers around. Some went to school, some went to ministry, some helped out with Catholic charities and helped immigration. So I just followed along.
So at the end of that process, what was the decision?
The decision was, before I had to join, I had to have a psychological examination. And I
That
told
should be no problem. You just finished up a psychology degree, right?
yeah. But who knows, like, even though you learn about it, you also have to like integrate it in yourself.
Yes. The pragmatic side of things.
Yeah. So you got to practice what you preach, you know?
So how did the test go?
The psychologist, we were just talking, and the psychologist kind of just like pointed out to me that as I was telling him, you know, whenever I want to become a priest, I was thinking about this girl a lot. But whenever I was thinking with this girl, I was thinking about the priesthood a lot, you know? So I was back and forth a lot. And he said, look, Andrew, I've seen a lot of priests. I've seen the good priests and also the priests who kind of messed up and led to scandal. And he said the priests who kind of fell into scandal, when they talked to me, they said like they didn't really know what they wanted. And he says, Andrew, it's okay right now to say I don't know. And you need to figure who you are and what you want first before you think about committing to something that might be your life vows. So, I mean, of course, in the process, when you're in a religious formation, they ask, it's you don't have to make a vow right away, you know, but it's like a dating process where you have to have some sort of commitment. So he says, take some time to know yourself. And after that, I was just super lost, because now, like, this ideal self, like, I moved back home with my parents. I was like, hold up, I'm back at square one in high school, you know? And I was just so, like, just lost, man. And yeah, so that after that, I was just like, I just want to prove to myself that I can make a choice, you know? And that actually led me, to like Dr. Jordan Peterson when I stumbled across him.
Right. So quite the father figure as far as, like, you know, time to grow up, bucko, and learning about, you know, who you are, the psychology of who you are, and of growing up or coming of age. So what was that process like? You're back at home, you're, like you said, you're kind of regressing back into like a high school mode. You're like, no, I want to progress and move forward with my life and my calling and figure out my ideal self. And so, so how were you processing that, and how did Jordan Peterson help out during that time?
Yeah. So a lot of, I guess I should kind of like sum up, not all my parents' ways of life, but kind of how I grew up was my parents were like, we suffered a lot and we want to do a lot for you so that you don't have to suffer what we went through. Right. But when I came back home, I was like, no, Mom, no, Dad. Like, I want to do my own. I want to do my own thing. Stop cooking for me. Mom, I know you love me, but let me be by myself and figure this out on my own.
I can do my laundry, like, darn it.
Yeah. But yeah, I was just super hyper focused on, like, I need to be who I am. And I was listening to like these motivation videos, and I would just like binge on Jordan Peterson and listen to all of his like lectures, beginning with the biblical lectures, and just teaching me how to be authentically courageous in the face of fear, you know, because what I was really afraid of was making a choice, because making a choice meant I had to sacrifice. And my approach to sacrifice, I guess, in university was I want to work hard so you don't have to suffer pain or hardships. So I was trying to like avoid sacrifice because I wanted to only see the good. But now, like what Peterson taught me was kind of like, no, the meaning of life comes with the sacrifice, comes with carrying the burden of other people's suffering, and you carry it and put it onto yourself to lead into the kingdom of God and in the greater good. And that it's part of the process. Kind of like that's what he taught me. That I don't have to avoid sacrifice, that I had to accept it and then still make something good out of it, because with sacrifice there comes this freedom to choose. So yeah, like I just really wanted to put myself out there and say I just need to put myself in a hard situation so I can learn who I'm capable of. And that growth only happens with friction. You know, when I was just comfortable, I didn't really see myself going anywhere. So, yeah, I just try to find challenges for myself to see who I could be.
Yeah, Andrew, I feel motivated just listening to you phrase it like that. But the thing about motivation is like you could actually be non-productive listening to motivation videos, though well-intended,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So I'm just wondering, like maybe talk about some of the things, like the choices you made. So like, what does it mean to say yes? What does it mean to say no? Or like, what are some of the pragmatic ways you started carrying these lessons out?
Yeah. So you actually touched on something where I realized was kind of the limitations of kind of just YouTube in general, and just listening to all these podcasts. Was I was more focused on listening on other people to say, be yourself, rather than actually being myself, if that makes sense. Like I was listening to their words, and I would actually try to copy what they were doing. So oftentimes when I interacted with people, I would just regurgitate what Peterson said, or what I hear from what I learned on Joe Rogan, or what I.
But see, that's just something that he talked about, where there's like a schism in your mind that happens, where it's like you can recognize, or like you can think about what you're thinking about saying and recognize that it's just kind of fluff, or it's other people's words and it's not really true or from your essence.
Yeah.
And so here you end up doing it with his own words, which is interesting.
I know. Yeah. And so I actually ended up still being in that circle of like trying to embody this ideal self with actually being myself. And I guess kind of like when you talk about what it means to say yes and to say no, I realize it really is based on kind of like, Peterson calls it what you aim at, you know? And what I aimed at for the entire time, at least during that phase of my life where I was at home in my hometown, was this image, you know? But I was imagining this image, but I actually wasn't being myself. So I did this self-authoring program, at least the future authoring program, and I would write everything out, you know? But so he was talking
maybe
about
describe what that is.
Yeah. So practically, Dr. Jordan Peterson has this program where you're able to lay out all the aspects of your life where you see your ideals, so you know what to aim towards. But not only what you want to aim towards, but what you don't want to be in. And it's kind of like he just really breaks it down from like the broad picture to like the very specifics, so you know what to work on. But looking back at myself now, was even though I did the process and I was very meticulous with it, how I approached it wasn't really beneficial or productive, because I was thinking like, oh, I wrote out this big plan for myself, but whenever I didn't fulfill that plan, I would end up kind of just like beating myself, like, Andrew, why aren't you doing this? Andrew, you should have done that. Andrew, you could have. And it would be like mental flagellation. I call it that. And that type of attitude where I would just beat myself up was more harmful than good, because it just ended up making me feel more guilt and shame for not becoming the person who I wanted to be. And it wasn't allowing me, because I realized to be a good person, you had to act good. Yeah, there was like this divide of, there's this good person out here and there's this unworthy person who I felt right now. And I had to reach up there, but like I didn't allow myself to treat myself good because I only thought the image was good, not me, if that makes sense.
So there's like a discrepancy or a gap between your potential. Yeah, I know there's there's a quote that that we had talked about where Jordan Peterson says something to the effect of, "You're afraid to define your parameters of success because it will make you more aware when you fail." And so it just clarifies that ideal, right? That's up above you. And instead of it like positively drawing you towards it and being this healthy process, it can actually be like this burden or this weight of like, oh, everything that I should be, I'm not. Everything that I should do, I just fail. And so, okay, so yeah, so you're writing these things out in the self-authoring program. And I'm just wondering, like at this point, what was your next direction after this process?
Yeah, so I was kind of staying in my hometown for 2 years, started just substitute teaching, and then did this long-term sub gig at my own high school, and it just made me really realize like, oh, this is actually like a really challenging like task. So I was just thinking like, maybe I should try teaching out, because it's just like you're jumping into this chaos, because literally when I did the long-term subbing, they just like, hey, here's a book, bye, and I just had to figure out everything on my own. Yeah, so I ended up applying to this program called Place Corps at Loyola Marymount University, where you're a graduate student getting your Master's of Education while also teaching at an underserved Catholic high school, and you live in a convent with a community of teachers who live within the area. Okay. So I was just thinking like, this is allowing me to kind of challenge myself with something that's hard and teaching myself skills. I get to live in community if I'm ever interested in living in a religious community in the Catholic Church.
So still considering entering the priesthood at this point?
Yes. Okay.
So this was like a warm up, or, just to keep you in that mode of thought?
Yeah. And I kind of prayed to God and said like, God, I want this to be like boot camp. I want you to straighten me up.
Boot camp.
So that I can prove to myself I'm worthy to be yours. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So before that, I came across this priest who randomly heard my confession while I was at this worship service, and he invited me to a pilgrimage through Israel, in the Holy Land. So in the month before I entered the program, I went with a group of young adults to the Holy Land, and we like hiked across like from Jericho to Jerusalem on the way the Samaritan. I bathed in the Sea of Galilee. Wow. I have my swimming trunks on, but
it's a good picture.
The Sea of Galilee. Yeah, we prayed at the holy sites. We held liturgy, like Eastern Christian liturgy in the site of the Holy Sepulchre where Jesus was in the tomb. And that was incredible. Like the priest was able to allow that to happen and reserve a spot for us.
Yeah. So what was it like being a Western Christian going to the East?
Yeah. So it just really taught me a lot about like family, and at least part of the program was like the priest religious community that lives in the Holy Land. They really wanted to dialogue with the Jewish community over there and rebuild the relationship and reconcile the pains they had in the past. So he would invite us to kind of go to religious Jewish families, and we would celebrate Sabbath with them. We would go to their synagogues, we would have meals with them, and it just really taught me about like these Jewish people are teaching me like like what it means to be a family. And what's so cool about their faith is that it's like you could feel that God is in the soil. You know, it's so
How so?
like it's so rooted, like kind of like even their music when they sing and dance in the synagogue, and it's in everything they do. You know, they give blessings to their children as they eat this meal, and every meal has a purpose according to like what how God like planned the world. And like it's just like everything was with God integrated in it. And it's like and it was in the music and yeah,
Even down to the peas and potatoes?
yeah.
Wow. What was it like Sabbathing? Can you describe what that is? And
Yeah, so
what it was
kind of
like doing it with
Sabbath.
them?
Yeah, it's like at least it depends because Jewish. I mean, I don't know too much. This is only what I learned from like the 2 months. But there's a huge spectrum of the Jewish faith where it comes very orthodox to kind of more like as a lifestyle. But with the families we stayed with, like on Sabbath and their word Shabbat, they don't do anything. They don't like have their phones on. They don't turn off the lights in the room. So the priest told me, don't turn off the lights if you go to the bathroom because they can't turn it back on. So
Wow.
yeah, they're just a
Do they drive
complete different
cars
rest.
like during
I
the
think they just
rest day?
walk. Yeah, I think they
Wow.
just walk.
Huh.
So
So they just shut
uh,
things down for a whole day.
yeah,
Now,
yeah.
what was it like for you trying to adjust to that? Were there ever discrepancies in that? Like you weren't able to coordinate, or you just weren't quite used to how they were doing that?
Yeah. So when a couple of friends and I, along with our priest who was with us, we went to visit the Western Wall, which was the remains of the Second Temple of Jerusalem. We tried going back to the house with all our stuff, but then there was no way to contact the people because the door was locked and we didn't know where they were. We tried visiting their synagogue. We were just stranded outside for like 2 hours. But ended up they were taking a nap inside. Yeah.
Oh
So
man.
I mean,
All's well that ends well, I guess.
yeah, yeah.
Still, that sounds pretty similar to like the Amish or the Amish communities over in the East Coast, where my wife's heritage comes from, the Pennsylvania Dutch, and like I know that they have very strict times where no electronics, no certain technologies, the horse and buggy in place. It's just interesting, some of the cultural synthesis there. So yeah, I'm just wondering, back to the Holy Land pilgrimage. Okay, so what were some of your takeaways during that time? I know that people go on these pilgrimages or these spiritual journeys to holy sites and locations to hear from the Lord or to receive some type of healing. I'm wondering if something like that took place for you.
Yeah. So one of the most profound experiences kind of just visiting the sites was whenever we would visit the places where, the way of the cross, where Jesus carried his cross, or where he stood in front of Pontius Pilate, in front of the crowd at the Praetorium. Also on Calvary at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, was that we would read the biblical passages from Scripture, and then we would pray and sing from our hymn book. And then kind of my expectation, kind of like this idea of like, I want to become this ideal self who I really wanted to be, was I tried to imagine what was going on back in the day. I was trying to like really say like, Jesus, show me the way. I want to see you. I want to know you. I want to just be like you. But then they came back to this place where I was, where like, Andrew, you're just where you're at right now. Like it was kind of like I really wanted to become like Jesus, but then I knew deep inside like Jesus is his own person and you have to be yourself. And then there was a talk that one of the sisters in the religious community gave to us, and I forgot actually the talk, but I remember she was talking such meaning behind Christ being the Word of God. From that, I kind of saw that Christ being the Word of God was that he actually gave me the words to speak, to relate to the Father, to relate to this transcendent other who I was trying to connect to. And that he, through the words of being able to say, Abba, Father, like that was Jesus coming alive again. And that's, he still allowed me to be myself, but he gave me the words to say, I can say Abba, Father. I can call you God, Father. You know, you're that close to me where I'm directly inherited. You directly inherit me to be your child. And it's kind of like accepting and recognizing myself as the beloved rather than trying to become this ideal self that was only the best version of myself, you know, rather than allowing the Father to love the good, the bad, and all the in-between of who I am.
Andrew, could you describe the act of being part of the beloved, or what you mean by belovedness?
Yeah. So as I was thinking about this a lot last night, like there's a difference actually between the belovedness and the ideal self. And I realized it comes from my relationship with the Father. So the belovedness is kind of like this acceptance of my whole self and integrating all the good and bad into me. While the ideal self was kind of more like this projection of this best self. Like, God, I only want to give you the best versions of myself, but the bad selves, no, those are bad. Get those out, get those out, get those out. Only see the good in me.
Is that like giving him only your Twitter feed or something like that?
Yeah. And I don't tell him what's underneath. I don't tell him like how I feel. I just say like, God, you're always good. God, it's always going to be great. You know, I'd always try to twist it to a positive without actually allowing these negatives to sink in. So I realized that's actually what was causing this divide, was not acknowledging kind of like these bad, I don't even call it bad, but like these feelings of turmoil. And I'm not sharing it with God. So that's what the ideal self that I wanted to present to God. With my belovedness, I receive the graces from the Father. I allow him to love me. While when I'm with my ideal self, I only want to give the best parts of myself to the Father. So it was like I didn't think that the Father was capable of loving me unless I do something for him first. And then the Father, as the belovedness, is kind of, he's generous with abundant mercy, that he has room to give, while with my ideal self, the Father wanted to challenge me more. He wanted more from me. And he wasn't pleased until he wanted things a certain way. You know, with the belovedness, the Father is pleased with who I am, but just encouraging me to say, hey, you know, try this a little more. I have more in store for you. You know, I'm rooting for you. You know, so kind of just to sum it all together, with the belovedness, I'm able to be small and surrender to kind of like God as the other, and trust that he is good. While when I was trying to be my ideal self, I was trying to make myself big and influential, and then take the place of Jesus Christ. You know, like I was trying to make myself the savior, which ended up kind of just like, it just, I constantly felt torn, you know, because whenever I patched this one hole in my life, another hole would patch up, you know, and I just always thought, I'm doing something wrong, Lord, you know, like what's wrong with me? But now, like it just really taught me a lot of humility, accepting the belovedness from the lover.
All right. Well, okay. So that was your takeaway from the pilgrimage, and you come back to the States, right? Did you go back to teaching?
So I came back to the States, and literally I had 3 days to pack up my stuff, and I moved down to LA to my program. So I was like,
cutting it close.
I'm on like this high.
Yeah. Okay. So now, did you go back to the future authoring program, or Peterson, or the YouTube videos, or did you have other teachers or other people that you turned to at that point in your development?
So at that time, yes, I was still listening to a lot of Peterson. I listened to a lot of Jonathan Pajot. I also listened to other, I guess, spiritual teachers, you know, Eckhart Tolle, kind of just recognizing the difference between thought forms and this deeper awareness in this deeper layer. And kind of, I was still in this phase of constantly trying to absorb what I was learning from the YouTube artists. And after, of course, from that religious, from that Holy Land pilgrimage, I didn't immediately kind of just like, oh, like God loves me, I'm okay. You know, I was still kind of like thinking I had to earn God's love. So it wasn't actually until kind of like this program, being a grad student and also a first-time full-time teacher, that I hit my limit where like I was constantly trying to be my best, trying to listen to all these YouTube videos, that I just felt tired and bitter and just burnt out, you know, thinking that everyone's always watching me, all these students are always watching me, all these parents are always expecting from me, I have to. And then I just got tired. And then kind of just like mid-year, I was like, I'm not liking the person who I'm becoming, you know? And even my community mates who I lived with in the convent were starting to realize that, like, I was just very tense a lot, you know, and kind of distancing myself from the community themselves because I was so focused on this self-development. So from this, you know, I realized like I need I need help, you know. I need someone who lived the life before me. So at Loyola Marymount University, it's run by the Jesuit order in the Catholic Church, and I was able to connect with the spiritual director, who's actually the director of Ignatian spirituality. And their spirituality is very big on discernment and knowing, you know, they call it the true spirit and the false spirit, you know, how to make choices in navigating the voices in your head that lead to being closer to God, which is called consolation, or drawing yourself away from God, which is called desolation. And from that, he's really been teaching me how to integrate my thoughts and feelings. So kind of where I'm at right now is I'm actually kind of taking a break from like listening to like lectures and teachers all the time, just to kind of like listen to my own feelings and thoughts and allow myself to be integrated as a whole. So doing things like meditation, reading books, kind of in a way where it's a different when you read a book, you know, because you actually practice using your internal voice compared to like a YouTube video. You're kind of just like absorbing like this sponge and you're not really actively involved.
What do you mean by the internal voice?
Yeah, like when you read, you kind of like, you read the words in the book and you're doing it. So you actually become involved in whatever story or narrative that you're reading in the book. So
like you have a part
I
to
kind
play
of
in
try
it?
to incorporate that. What was that?
Like you have a part to play inside of the story?
Yes. Yeah. And I kind of just think about that, Joel. It's like God is asking me now to participate in his life. Like he's asking me to be like him. Like I know, kind of like not be like him where I have to force myself, but like I get to accept, like be like him by accepting kind of the flaws of what I have and healing kind of like the childhood wounds that I grew up with rather than ignoring them. You know, giving grace to myself as he would give grace, being merciful to myself as he would be merciful.
Is this a process of integration, you'd say?
Yeah, so definitely could call it like that. And I think this stage of my life right now is kind of a stage of rebuilding myself, and kind of, you know, when I listen to that voice in my head of what I realized comes from my childhood wounds of like being afraid, being sensitive, being vulnerable. You know, before I would kind of just like, you know, you're weak, get over it. But now I'm saying like, I'm listening to you. I want to be patient with you. What do you have to say? And it actually just makes me feel more like whole. I can't describe it. Like I just feel more in myself instead of like kind of just lost in the periphery of thought.
I want to get back to what you said about the desolation, or like maybe the destructive, or maybe the depressed. Would I be correct in using those words to describe that desolation?
It's more like it's more like this intuition of feeling away from God. You're away from your center, and you're being pulled away from yourself and disintegrating.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, maybe for me and others that find themselves in those places from time to time, or have been there for a long time, like what's the process to get out of that mode of being?
Yeah, yeah. So it just makes me think about when people talk a lot about not having a purpose in their life, right? And they say like it's like this dark void where there's this lack of interest, this lack of being able to do anything, this lack of not finding purpose or creativity or some sort of like value in yourself that you can contribute to this dark void. And at least now, how I'm kind of coming to terms with it is this dark void actually seems to be something like endless potential. Like it's like this overwhelming, like there's so many things out there, and I feel so small and helpless that I don't know what I can do or if it would even matter because I'm so insignificant. There's nothing to me. But what I realized from this understanding of the belovedness is that like I have to be Christ to myself. Like all my life I wanted to hear this voice or someone to tell me, Andrew, you're good enough. And it was someone outside of me I wanted to hear of that, you know, and I thought it would come if I get like this university degree, or if I fell in love with someone, or if I became a priest, people would tell me that, Andrew, you're good enough. But it was outside of me. But what I recognized from the belovedness is that the Father tells me, I love you for who you are, and you must love yourself too. And now I'm trying my best to take on the role of Christ and talk to kind of like those insecure, sensitive, vulnerable parts of Andrew who grew up with these wounds of a childhood, you know, and I have to be Christ to myself. And when I'm in that dark place, when I freak out and I hear these voices like, don't go there, you're not going to do it, you're not good enough, just stay where you're at, you know, I have to speak from that dark place that says, we got this, you know, let's do this together, you know, and I have to find that voice in me throughout all the stimuli and images and these memories that I had before. And I have to really consciously speak and say, you are worth it. And it's like this voice that you have to really dig deep for. You know, it's not like you dismiss kind of the voices that pull you down, but you go through it. And then from that you find that voice of life in you that says, it's still worth it. We got this, and I love you.
You know,
we'll do this together.
I'm revisiting the accounts in Exodus on Mount Sinai and how Moses approached this mountain. And, you know, I always remember this story and others about, you know, light is good and darkness is bad, right? Yeah. But as the narrative in Exodus talks about this mountaintop ascension and coming to that point where heaven meets earth, or where, you know, we connect with the great other, the transcendent other, as you described it. Mm-hmm. It says that God was shrouded in darkness, or he was cloaked in a dark cloud. Mm-hmm. And it's just so interesting. I'm like, why the heck would we think of God as, you know, he's the God is light, it says in 1 John. And but why would he be cloaked in darkness? And there's also the darkness that's in the tomb, right? So mm-hmm. completed Holy Week and Resurrection Sunday, Easter. And in that story, there's this element of darkness that Christ enters and is completely engulfed by darkness, but then the light emerges. And as you're talking about your life, it's like, wow, I think there's some connection here, because there's like this cloak and darkness of it, in a bad sense, of like these things that seem to be harming or hurting or insecurities. But then there's this positive side where it's actually like potential, and like it could emerge light, or it could reemerge resurrection, or to be able to understand the language of heaven, or the language of the transcendent other, and come down and be able to share that with the nation, or to share that with the world, or integrate who you are fully with all the different voices that are within us. So I'm wondering if am I off on that, or do you feel like there's some type of connections there?
Spot on, man. Spot on. And I think kind of just like, yeah, we kind of grew up with this culture, at least in the church, where like light is good only. When you think about mystery or darkness or things you don't understand, that's bad. You have to make that known, So kind of growing up, like I was just like obsessed with writing, and like would constantly just try to like write down my thoughts, so that I wanted to know God. Like I felt like He was the solution, to everything, right? But when it was kind of like, yeah, like what Peterson talks about, your aim again. Like if God is the solution, then that means I see myself as the problem, Mm. And when I constantly see myself like a problem, I always feel like I'm not good enough. So I guess in this ideal self perspective, I was constantly trying to shine the light and not allowing mystery or darkness to be, But now when I realize in accepting my belovedness, it's like I'm acknowledging, God, I'm small and you're big, and you will somehow love my smallness. And I will accept that you are more than who I can understand or imagine. But you somehow still love me. I know you still love me, but you're still a mystery. You're still beyond me. And whatever images, thoughts, words, concepts I can think of, it's not you. And that's okay. Like I don't have to have everything right now. But what seems to be true is like, but me saying I acknowledge you for who you are in the holiness of your mystery, that's somehow right. Like that just feels right. That it just, I don't know. And it's not like I'm solving anything. I'm just acknowledging who I am and where I'm at.
C.S. Lewis wrote in Mere Christianity, he was comparing maybe like general morality of how our culture would appropriate it in the Western civilization and that of Christianity. But he said that there happens to be this break where the divergence is that Christianity believes that there's what they call the appropriation of the Christ life, Lewis calls it, and that we really believe that there's this energy inside of us that is reshaping and reforming us or transforming us into, call it the image of the beloved, right? Or that father-son relationship with perfect love, unifying their oneness, but yet having they're two different persons. So what I'm wondering is like, okay, so are you trying to describe that at the same time, where it's not like I'm trying to be this morally awesome person all the time, which of course, like you described the ideal, it's like you have these moral ideals of what it is to be good and stoic and productive and meeting all of your potential. But then there's the acknowledgement where it's like, this process, a whole heck of a lot of it, maybe all of it, has very little to do with me and my efforts. It's almost like it's more coming to a position of choice and coming into line, or coming to the way and allowing that life to unfold within us.
Yeah. It even just makes me think, I think you just described the Trinity, man. Like how, like God is one, but three persons, where He is unified, but each person of the Trinity still contains their distinguished personhood, where you're still yourself, but you're united in this unifying God. Yeah, what else do I call it?
Well, that was a fantastic attempt to try to describe what is usually a very deep well called the Trinity.
Yeah. Like you can go on and on, but it just makes me yeah, think about, I remember a priest telling me that who you are, if you want to know who you are, look at your relationships. Because ultimately, we only can become who we are by our relationships. Like, I only know who I am if I can distinguish myself from you, you know, and same as yourself, you know, you only know who you are if you can distinguish yourself from me. And like I realize when I see that there's no way to be like, no man is an island to themselves, you know, you're always in relationship. But what lays out the path of life is, in relationship, do you either see yourself as the son or a slave? You know, do you choose to accept yourself as you belong to this greater whole? Or do you think that you're forced to be bounded by this coercion of, you don't have a choice and you must do what I tell you to? And maybe that's what it is. Like the light of Christ is, you have a choice to accept the limitations of your being by relationship, but from the limitations of your partialities, you become a whole. You become a whole, right? When you like when you have, okay, we're always going to be partial. We're always going to be not enough. But when I accept myself to give myself to what we believe as God or the great other, he incorporates with us, with the rest of humanity and being, and that's what makes us whole, is that we're together. And it's not just in my body. It's like it's what I give through my actions and my deeds and my prayers and my intentions that makes this whole exist.
And yet still maintain the multiplicity.
That still maintains the multiplicity.
Right.
Like, yeah,
it's not like this uniform set of robots or
Mhm.
anything. It's like somehow we can be unique and different and unlike anybody else, but we can still have a oneness that brings us into one organism. You know, the other thing too that you touched on was this interesting reversal that Christianity seems to have of like, okay, so if you want to be free, be a slave. Right?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, it's so interesting because it's like, okay, actually the proper limitation can produce the greatest freedom.
Yeah.
Right. And then also, you know, I know Western Christianity puts a lot of emphasis on what we call free will.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've been learning recently is that hasn't been a shared way of looking at it historically in the church.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that there's other ways of approaching it where true freedom is actually that, like obeying God or coming into alignment with God. And anything short of that would be bondage or the opposite of freedom. And
Mm-hmm.
like you could say the tempter, right? The evil one, Satan, comes to twist it and say like, I promise you freedom, right? It's this wide, it's huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
It looks great. You can do whatever you want, you know, follow your pleasure, follow your passions, wherever you go, that's where freedom's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But then what, to the practitioner, right? To the person that actually accepts that offer and continues to move forward with it, what they find is that there's dead ends, that there's a bondage to that all of a sudden these things that they thought were producing freedom is in fact producing more non-freedom, right? It's bringing limitations. And so again, like Christianity flips it. They're like, no, actually do these types of limitations and fall into a line of obedience and acceptance of, you know, the way of God. And it opens you up to a freedom and becoming an integral whole person that you could never have imagined.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I actually think that the reason why, if you only do things for yourself, you actually end up just being stuck in yourself, because this is what I realized earlier too when I was trying to chase after this image, was there comes to a limit of, I only know so much of myself. You know, there's only so much I know of myself and what I can do and what I can like attain. Or
right, how self-aware are we really?
yeah, like I'm only 2024. Like human civilization have lived for like billions of years. Like, who am I to say I know how to live? You know, and I
Yeah.
think what freaks us out is if you only live with yourself, then we know that at the end of our finish line, we're going to the grave. You know, and we see our mortality in front of us, and we think that if you only live within this little circle of what I call me, it's gonna go to the grave, and then there's no life after that because it's only been contained in this little circle. So when you open yourself to be in relationship with others, you know, it's not where you just throw yourself out there and allow others to mold and manipulate you without choice, because that ends up being as a slave to self. But you choose to be yourself with others and for others. It's like you know that you're living in this lineage and continuation of what's been happening for billions and billions of years, and you live this pattern that's beyond your bounded lifespan, you know. And it almost makes sense now. Like what I at least understand of eternal life is that, like, I trust that life is eternal. Like, I trust that life, even in the face of death, will continue to move on for the good. And it means letting go of myself and like dying to myself in a way. So,
Well, Andrew, I had one more curiosity. I'm just wondering, what's it like being a grade school teacher and a grad student at the same time? And then secondly, are you still teaching right now? Like, what is it like in all of these shelter-in-place orders and during this isolation time?
yeah. So, yeah, I'm still teaching, man. I teaching through Zoom, and it was kind of like just this big shock curveball of like, I didn't know what I was doing my first year of teaching, and now I definitely don't know what I'm doing with this online stuff. So no one knows what they're doing. Like, every veteran teacher feels like a first year teacher again, because no one has ever done this online teaching for grade school. So yeah, there just came a point, like, as I was just staying home and trying to prepare for all this stuff, like, I was just feeling very discouraged because I would just try to like think about what to put together. But then on the Zoom calls, like, these kids weren't responding, they weren't showing up, they didn't have their video camera on. So I was just talking to the screen, and I didn't know whether they were learning or not. I didn't know how to engage them.
Right. What's
So
the feedback process really?
I just tried to type in the chat room. It's like, hey, is anyone there? You know? But then I just felt really discouraged and down about myself, because I just saw that I depended so much on my value of myself based on how I could how others succeed, you know? Like, I was so much based on how others reacted or felt. And just, I actually talked to my old high school English teacher, and he told me, like, you know, a lot of the times of success comes from times where you don't script it, you know, and it just happens in the moment when it's like this spontaneous realization in the chaos. And he's like, you know, what it means to find success for yourself or fulfillment is like, you only know that for yourself, you know, and you know that by knowing your limits and what you're capable of. And yeah, so that kind of like that twist of like, I don't need others, once again, I don't need others' approval to be myself or to say I'm okay, is kind of like seeing myself as a person more than a product, you know, and acknowledging that my very existence in itself has worth without me trying to do anything out of it. Because I realized in my unconscious metaphysics that if God is perfect and good, that he expects me to do good and perfect things, you know? So I just thought that if I wasn't doing a good job, then I'm failing him somehow. But yeah, over time, like, it comes back to this theme of belovedness, that God loves me for who I am more than what I do. And what he wants me to do is like, it's just, he invites me to discover who I could be, but in a way where it's like, have fun with it as well. You know, try to find in a way where you bring yourself, your true self into being, you know, but don't allow it to kind of, don't let what you do define who you are.
Right.
So it's been a
So
very humbling process, this quarantine.
yeah. So would you call this like the spirituality of quarantine, or do you think?
Yeah, like it's just teaching me how to be with myself, and
Mm,
and to realize how obsessed I've been with productivity, and yeah, and it's just, I think it's just reevaluating everyone's priorities about what matters in life and what it means to be with the people you're around.
so does that mean that you're putting in practice a Sabbath rest, kind of like your friends in Israel?
Yeah, yeah, and coming to terms with that, yeah,
Yeah.
and
Maybe leave a note at the door if you take a nap, huh?
yeah, yeah, so I don't lock anyone out. That's
Yeah.
funny.
All right, Andrew, this has been a delight. I was just wondering if there's anything else you wanted to bring up or wanted to chat while I have you here.
Yeah, yeah, I guess we've talked a lot about me, but how about you? Like, how have you kind of uh, lived your life with what's going on in the world up to now?
Well, perhaps we'll save the full story of my end, at least, for another video. But quickly, I have to say, on the opposite end, I am not working full time like you are right now. So
Mhm.
it's really introduced a whole lot of space or chaos or potential. And I kind of feel like Tom Hanks on this island, right, where the chaos of the sea is surrounding me. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, if I'm going to survive this thing, what do I need to do? And I found that the encroachment of this domain of time or chaos is like, comes in the form of like snoozing my alarm,
Oh
right? Feeling
yeah.
like I have all day, why bother? Right. And all
Yeah,
of a sudden I'm
yeah,
like, wait, is this Wednesday?
yeah,
Right. So I called you yesterday. I'm like, you ready for the interview?
yeah,
You're like, no, like that's tomorrow.
yeah,
So
yeah.
things like that where like that's the encroachment of this domain of time that really wants
Mhm.
to break me down and disintegrate me into this like chaotic sea of potentiality or just wanderingness. And so space, right, is the domain of order where you like push back against the domain of time or chaos. And so like in Tom Hanks' case, he in Castaway, that film where, you know, the film with Wilson, the volleyball. So he goes
Mhm.
through this list and see if I can remember them all. It's like he makes routines for his day, right? He schedules out
Mhm.
time. He counts his days. He gets up early. He moves away from the shore, right? Where that's like, think of the sand like crumbling away at the earth. And he moves into the dry rock, so a place of stability. And so he's trying
Mm.
to install all of these routines and aspects of order to maintain his sanity. I mean, socializing is one of them. And he's like, I ain't got anybody else on this
Yeah.
island, but I got a volleyball, you know, I do what I
Yeah.
can. And so all of that is very real for my life. I feel like I'm in like a like isolation crisis mode of
Mhm.
organizing what I do in order to move forward and be productive and make the most out of this time.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Because I realize in isolation there comes this um I call it this desire to get out of your stuck in yourself syndrome, you know, because when you set your goals for yourself, kind of like once you kind of look towards the destiny, like once you ask the question, you know, the answer is already kind of there. So you kind of know what to expect, you know? So there's this already like, I have this feeling I know what's going to happen. But when you're put yourself out there in the world where, uh, like you have a job or you have something to do, like people give you something like, hey, can you do this? And then it puts you in this, it gets you out of yourself and it says like, you know, there's more to life than what I can plan out. And there's this excitement where I get to be on this edge of chaos and order where I can use what I know and also somehow can I connect to this person who's outside of me, who's asking me to be someone or do something. And I think kind of that's kind of the thrill and the adventure of life is to, you know, allow yourself to put yourself out there based on people's needs, or whether they're suffering or what they, yeah. So
it seems like we are fighting the good fight, but from opposite ends, where you have maybe an overproductive life and you're trying to like actually use the domain of time in a good way, like with Sabbath rest, right? To push back against, overstructure or being burnt out or something. But then in my case, I am underproductive, right? And I need to like forcefully integrate some order and some routines in my life. That way I don't just swim in the sea of my own thoughts.
Yeah.
Hey,
It's
Andrew, I'm wondering if you could share some of the books that you're reading with the listeners.
Yeah. So currently what I'm reading every night is as I am journeying to kind of integrate myself as a whole, reading a book called New Seeds of Contemplation by the Trappist monk Thomas Merton. Really trying to, let's see, I'm making a lot of notes here.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like it's laced with rainbow.
Yeah, rainbow. But yeah, like introduce myself back to the contemplative tradition of just like, I'm not trying to figure out or pin down God anymore. I just want to be personal with him, So just really reading this every night. And Thomas Merton just really has a way of just saying what I've been trying to say, but he does it so eloquently and poetically. So that's been really great. Uses contemplation. You gave me this book. It was pretty cool. The God Experience, which is an essay of hope edited by a Jesuit priest, which is super cool. I was reading a lot while I was in LA, and it was just, like that was kind of like my reintroduction of, pursue what I really love and don't just get stuck with the things I have to do. So I began with that, but finishing this up right now. And as I'm like discerning the different voices in my mind and my heart, there is this book right here called God's Voice Within by a spiritual director and high school teacher, Mark Deus. I hope that's right. But it talks about Ignatian way to discover God's will, kind of just discerning the different voices within you, and then seeing what leads you to consolation, being closer to God, or desolation, being away from God, and then how to make choices, because that's what I really struggle with right now, is how to make a choice and live from that place.
Yeah. So the Ignatian, is that from Ignatius?
Saint Ignatius of Loyola. So it's his way of his own spirituality. It's really big on discernment and choices.
Okay. Yeah. Hold up that Experience in God book.
Oh.
The red one.
Oh.
Red one.
There you are.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just wanted to give the quick backstory to that one, because that one was actually sent to me through thriftbooks.com, used bookstore that I really like and I'm a big fan of. And so I ordered a David Bentley Hart book with a similar title, and they sent me that book instead. And I was like, what the heck? This is different. And so I wrote to them and I was like, what's going on here? They're like, oh, whoops, that got, mixed up. It happens, every once in a long while. And feel free to keep it and read it. We'll refund you. Or you could just send it to someone else that would want to read it. And all of a sudden, ding, Andrew's name popped up to my head. And I'm like, I'm going to mail this to Andrew right now. And I didn't leave a note or anything. I just sent it off immediately. And then I get a call from you. You're like, whoa, bro, this book just came into my lap at the perfect time of my life. I'm like, all right.
Yeah. You flipped the switch, Joel.
Yeah. So cool, Andrew. I appreciate you sharing your further reading. I'm so grateful that you were able to join the channel today. This conversation has been awesome on my end. Listeners, if you think so, please leave a comment below. Or if you had any questions, I'll make sure that Andrew does check his devices and his YouTube. Not on Sabbath though. And he may be chiming in as well and can answer some of your questions too. So, Andrew, thank you, my friend, and I look forward to talking with you in the days to come.
Of course. Thank you so much, Brother Joe. God bless.
Man. Be well.